In addition to the all-Democratic and nearly all-female slate of candidates elected to statewide office last week, 3 out of 4 of the ballot questions were also voted into law. That includes the highly contested Question 1, which passed with just 52%, the narrowest margin among all 4 ballot questions. The measure, also known as the Millionaires tax or the Fair Share Amendment, imposes an additional 4% surtax on top of the already existing statewide 5% income tax on any household income exceeding $1 million. Supporters of the tax touted the additional revenue, estimates fall in the $1 to $2 billion range annually, which was earmarked for education and transportation, though opponents said state lawmakers will get the final say on the spending. They also warned the measure could cost jobs and drive wealthier citizens out of the state, though many believe that kind of backlash will be minimal. So what can we expect after the new tax takes effect on January 1st? To discuss, I'm joined by leaders of Yes on One, the president of the Massachusetts Budget and Policy Center, Marie Frances Rivera, and president of the Massachusetts Teachers Association, which contributed many millions to the effort, Max Page. Max, Marie Frances, good to see you both.
Thanks for having me on.
Appreciate it. Max, starting with you, as you know, there have been 5 prior efforts to tax wealthier people in the state at a higher rate. I led the most recent one 28 years ago. Every one of them has been crushed, literally crushed. What was different this time? Why'd you win?
Well, Jim, I think we won for a number of reasons. One is we put together a truly incredible campaign. I think one of the very best grassroots campaigns that's ever been launched in the state. I think we crafted this very intelligently. That is, we really wanted to make sure we were focusing on the very, very wealthiest individuals in the Commonwealth who've gotten wealthier over the past 28 years since you worked on this, and have gotten wealthier even during the pandemic. And on the flip side, we wanted to make sure that the public knew that the money would be going to things they care deeply about. Public education, pre-K through public higher education, and roads, bridges, and public transportations. So both parts of that equation, I think, really appealed to the voters. And I know it was close, but that's 100,000 votes.
Yeah.
For something that has been a third rail in Massachusetts politics.
You know, Marie Frances, a couple of things that weren't close were the spending. Your side, in great part funded by Max's organization and the national organization, outspent the opponents 2-to-1, 28 to 14 million. Plus, the most popular governor in America, while he opposed the question, didn't do it publicly with a passion. If either of those things had been changed, if there had been a level playing field on money and Baker had made this a crusade, do you think you'd be talking about a victory tonight?
So what I would say is that what this win shows is the power of inclusive democracy. When people have accurate facts, and one of the facts that has changed is that income inequality and the nature of our tax code, the upside down nature of our tax code, has just gotten increasingly worse over the decades. And voters felt that. Voters felt the, underfunding in schools. As a mother of somebody who sends their child to public school, I see the investments that are needed, right? I see the investments that are needed in the T. So people are seeing that, and it's no surprise that the vote turned out the way that it did.
Can we talk about both issues that Max raised a minute ago, starting with you, Marie Frances, the taxing of the wealthy and the spending and where it's targeted in the ballot question, now in the Constitution. Marie Frances, starting with you, Chris Doty, who ran for the Republican nomination for governor, he lost obviously to Jeff Deal, was on NECN on election night, and he said something like he had spoken to at least 100 wealthy individuals, business leaders, who said they were leaving Massachusetts because of this additional tax. 1, are you buying it? And 2, are you concerned about it?
So the anecdotes and the data that we have analyzed don't show the same thing. What we've seen in states like California, states like New York, who do have higher tax margins on wealthy, on wealth and income taxes, we've seen that actually, the estimates that were, when they've raised their tax rates that have supposedly are going to come in, they're even higher than they come in, than estimates show. We've seen that millionaires aren't fleeing those states. And we know that people are here in Massachusetts for a lot of reasons. Taxes aren't on the top of the list why people are here, even though we do have actually average taxes when you look at Massachusetts compared to the rest of the country. So.
Yeah, Max, you know, also what I had not even thought about during the campaign until I did some of the reading afterwards, and I'm sure you have thought about it, is while the rates are in the Constitution, and I think that's one of the things that was to your benefit, so the legislature, which is not wildly beloved in this state, can't mess with that. What they can do is they can change things like how much of a capital gain on the sale of your house is excluded from income, meaning raise it if they chose to do that, and thus have fewer people exposed to the tax. If they attempted to do some of those things to protect people just over the threshold, for example, the infamous one-time millionaires that was talked about nonstop near the end of the campaign, would the MTA oppose that?
Well, look, there's a lot of actually good incentives or write-offs that we talked about and the Marie Francis's organization spoke about in terms of housing. $500,000 for a couple comes off of a capital gain,
right,
which is why the vast majority of the houses that might be subject to this are really mansions, multi-million-dollar mansions, not someone who may have seen their house grow in value. What I want to say is that the key here is that we're going to be this great coalition, the Raise Up Mass coalition, and that the MTA has been part of, is going to be watching and supporting and insisting that the money gets spent on the needs that are there in public education and public transportation. And I think that that's the main thing we want to see.
But what's the answer? I hear that. We're going to get to that in a second. What's the answer to my question, though? If they wanted to essentially change the tax system in ways they're permitted to do to have fewer people subject to the tax, would you oppose that? Would your coalition oppose that?
What I'm saying at the moment, we would have to just all discuss this. The key is, though, that what Marie Francis's organization Mass Budget found is that the houses in the past year that would have been affected by this were on average $3.8 million. So I guess the point is, let's see, but we have a feeling that what's really going to be subject to this are multi-million-dollar homes and not that many of them.
Okay.
So
what I'll jump in and add to
Sure.
is that the changes that the Fair Share Amendment tax is making in just making our tax code more just is pretty monumental, and any other shifts to our tax code that would benefit wealthy individuals would then take us back a step. So that's something that we would have to look at.
Can we talk about the spending for a little bit? I don't want to debate ad nauseum the whole issue. Is the legislature required by constitutional provision to spend all the money on transportation and education? Because I have a feeling we disagree. I think the subject to appropriation language does give them latitude. So for argument's sake, as you both, I think, know, candidate Healy was on a radio show in October, and I asked her my usual very long-winded question, you'll hear in a second, and she gave a one-word answer, which I know made you happy. Here she is, and here I am. Are you prepared to say that if elected governor, you'll honor the voters' mandate if it passes and veto any legislative attempt to divert money, newly raised money by the millionaires tax, away from education and transportation?
Yes.
A woman of few words, I should say there. But there's something that probably, at least in my estimation, might make you not quite so happy. Here also in October is the second gubernatorial debate. Janet Wu from CVB asking Maura Healey a question.
If elected, Ms. Healey, where will you focus your attention first to alleviate their budget worries?
Cutting taxes. Cutting taxes. We also need to pass the tax reforms that Governor Baker proposed. These were tax cuts for seniors, renters, low-income, middle-income families. They included things like changes to the estate tax and, importantly, earned income credit for families.
You know, this is for you, Marie Francis, since you're the tax expert here. This tax, the surtax that you guys won on the ballot, question 1, would raise anywhere from 1.2, according to some people, billion a year to $2 billion a year. The tax cuts that Governor Baker proposed that the legislature didn't pass, that Maura Healey has advocated for nonstop, would cost somewhere just short of $1 billion. Are you not worried about the financial situation and the trade-off there and the pressure on the legislature? When I asked Maura Healey that question, she said, well, you have big surplus. Well, as you know, surplus is not a continuing thing. Both the tax cuts and question one would be continuing things. Doesn't that put a lot of pressure on the legislature in terms of what dollars are available to spend on education and transportation, Marie Francis?
Correct. So just to be clear, the tax proposals that Governor Baker proposed, some were one-time and some were more permanent changes. And some were benefiting lower income families, and some, like the estate tax, would directly benefit high income and high wealth families. So I would say, as we think about how to make our tax code more fair, we have to consider and be very clear about who these potential tax changes would impact.
Yeah, but Max, what I'm trying to get at is, obviously Marie Francis is right. They affect different people in different ways. I've been dealing with the legislature a long time in my former life. You deal with it now, Mass Tax Teachers Association, pretty powerful player. They're going to be competing pressures. There's the voter endorsed question one, raising money, $1.2 to $2 billion to spend on these two subject matter areas. And on the other hand, there's a lot of money that's going to be coming out if Maura Healey gets her way in terms of this tax break. Does that not worry you in terms of the people on Beacon Hill honoring the message of the voters?
Well, so Jim, it's been less than a week since the election, so you're going to have a hard time making me worried. At the moment, I'm very, very, very pleased about this incredible victory that took 107 years to get since they created.
How about when you do start worrying? Are you going to worry about that?
Well, what we're most not worried about, what we're going to be most conscientious about, that is our broad coalition, is that the full amount, and we expect it's $2 billion. We actually think it may be more than that. Goes to additional spending on public education and transportation, period. And then there's going to be a debate about whether there's some good, tax cuts that are necessary to support working people and others that are not. But I think we want to follow up on what now Governor-elect Healey said, which is she would veto it. And I think she also said that it needs to be in addition to existing.
She did say that. I want one more thing for you, Max, in terms of the spending. Correct me if I'm wrong. There's no mandate that the whatever amount is raised is split down the middle between transportation and education. Is that not correct?
That's absolutely correct.
So the vast majority of the funding for Yes on One came from your organization and your parent organization nationally, the National Education Association. Is there not going to be a lot of pressure on you from your 100,000 plus members that a disproportionate share of this be spent in the subject matter area where the money came from, education as opposed to transportation?
So, Jim, from the very beginning, the MTA members in our organization and the National Education Association have been committed to the three parts of this: K-12 schools, public higher ed, and roads, bridges, and transportation. Because guess what? Our members travel on the roads and on transportation. The families of our students and our students themselves need public transportation and roads and bridges. So we're committed to investments across the whole array of investments that are needed.
Last thing for both of you. I think Max said a minute ago it was 107 years, whatever it was, Marie Francis. What is a lesson that you'd transfer to people who say, you had no choice but to go to the ballot because you're changing the Constitution? But for those frustrated with inaction on Beacon Hill or action they don't like, what's your takeaway from this experience on question one that you think might be replicable or transferable to other campaigns? What would you say to those people?
Facts and getting involved. Like I said at the top, it's about inclusive democracy. And one thing that, we have a myriad of partners that we work with, organizers all around the state that use our information. And, as soon as the governor's budget proposal hits on March, the beginning of March, we'll be there providing really transparent information so that people can get involved in the process.
How about you, Max?
Well, I think we built an incredible campaign. We knocked on over 1 million doors. There were a couple hundred different organizations involved in this. So, of course, we had to spend a lot of money on things like advertisements and mailing and the like. We also really dedicated to the entire campaign, dedicated supporting community groups that went out door to door, made phone calls. I think that's a lasting lesson that makes the difference in the end. The other side had 4 billionaires and 2 multimillionaires funding them, and they never knocked on a door. And we are actually building for the long term. And it's worth reminding people that this is the latest effort going back to winning universal sick leave, the minimum wage, which will go up to $15 on January 1st, paid family and medical leave. And for the MTA, stopping the charter schools in 2016, winning the Student Opportunity Act for public schools, and now winning this great, question 1 for tax fairness. So there's a movement going on. And I think this whole campaign built on the previous victories and will frankly set us up for other ones in the future.
Max, Marie Francis, congratulations to you and your colleagues both. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.